Hey Anine, welcome to this mini lecture on how we get from an International Declaration of Human Rights to a domestic law that protects us in Australia. And so firstly, we'll talk about egalitarianism, which is a social philosophy that says everyone is equal and everyone deserves the same rights and opportunities because everyone is a human being. And I hope these sort of ideas sound a bit familiar to you because we have been studying the French Revolution and its ideas of equality that really led to the events of the French Revolution, because the French people were sick of the estate system, they were sick of being hungry and sick of being poor and started questioning what was going on. I mean, why is the king important anyway? And so how do we get from these ideas of equality from the French Revolution to a modern day situation? And I think what we should be thinking about is the Declaration of the Rights of the Man and Citizen, which we learnt about last lesson. So this document is very similar in nature to the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which was produced by the United Nations in 1948. We are going to pause at this point and think about the significance of 1948. So it was just 3 years after the Second World War had ended, and this was probably the most gruesome war ever. There were so many deaths, millions and millions and millions, and even more than that, wounded, scarred, affected by this war. And I want you to think about the fact that a lot of people that were killed and were injured were not soldiers killed by bullets zooming at them, but they were groups of people like the Jews, like people from the Slavic nations, like gypsies, homosexuals, prostitutes, prisoners of war who are protected by the Geneva Convention, who were placed in camps and then systematically gotten rid of by the Nazis. So I think we should think about the Universal Declaration of Human Rights as a direct response to these atrocities, because before that there had been no need to protect people from things like this, but now we needed to define crimes against humanity so that we could prosecute them under international law. So therefore, let's think about the fact that it's usually when a right is violated that we become very, very concerned with protecting ourselves for the future. So how do we get from an international declaration then, once it's there, to a legislation within Australia where we are protected? In many nations it's really simple. As soon as they sign the international declaration, it's part of their legal system. But in Australia it's a little bit more complicated. So we sign it, tick, but then we have to ratify it. And when we ratify it, it means that a bill is introduced in our federal parliament, which has to be passed. So that means before we're protected from slavery, we sign the Declaration Against Slavery, and then someone has to put a bill before the Parliament, Anti-Slavery Act of 2016, and that has to be passed before we are protected here in Australia. So unless our government ratifies something, we are not protected. And it also means that the United Nations can't really do anything to prosecute Australia for violating human rights if it's not ratified in our country. And let's think about the United Nations as a concept. It's just a group of countries working together. So they don't have a military or a government, really. So what can they even do, even if we have ratified it and we're violating it? They can't really do anything. What the United Nations relies on is a whole bunch of countries saying, you know what, we care about slavery. We want you to care. And so we are not going to trade with you. Economic cut off. We are not going to talk to you. Nothing. Sorry, you're out. And we might even send all our militaries to force you to respect the rights of your citizens. And so that's really the only way international law can be enforced, and it's a bit of a flaw in the system. So you've had enough of me now. You should have a basic understanding of how international law develops into domestic law, and also a little bit of understanding about its limitations, which you need to keep in mind for the next couple of tasks. Good luck!